program in which there was a near disaster with Apollo 13, and yet they saw the warning signals and they acted quickly. They had not been prepared for that crisis, and yet they used their ingenuity. Not only did they have to abort their mission, but they had to adapt to a new mission, and that mission at that point was simply to get back to Earth. There's some interesting analogies. That will be in the written transcript that I hope to upload as well. But what we want to talk about now is the challenge of how do we reach young adults called the millennials. What leaders of other denominations, what are they saying? What are other denominations saying? I think one of the first steps we have to understand that this is not a phenomenon only within the Seventh-day Adventist Church. Other denominations are struggling with this. I've talked with some of those leaders, and I've shared with you some of their responses. There's a deep concern expressed by these other groups. Most of all, Christian churches in North America are deeply concerned about the faith experience of young adults. They're concerned about the faith experience. Young adults are constantly being challenged by secular media. They are being bombarded with that in every direction. Peer pressure to adopt secular values is enormous. David Kinnaman, the new president, by the way, of the George Barna Institute, if you've heard of that, the ages 18 to 29 are the black hole of church attendance. This age segment is missing in action from most congregations. Speaking of North America, and I think this is really true also with Western-oriented divisions. Some of the rest of you may be dominated by young adults, but in many places in the world, that is not the case. Here are some of the identifying characteristics. We're going to move very quickly because we have a full program here. They are not inclined toward being separate from the world because they want to follow Jesus in ways that connect with the world. In other words, we often talk about how we need to be separate from the world. That doesn't necessarily resonate with the millennial because they are seeking, hey, listen, we need to connect with them where we're going to make a difference with the world. So there is a disconnect between some of our thinking and their thinking. Number two, they are skeptical of institutions but are not wholly disengaged from them. Don't assume for a moment, this comes from my research as well, don't assume for a moment that they want nothing to do with institutions. They are just skeptical. We'll talk about that a little bit more. Number three, these young adults sense God moving outside the walls of the church. They see God working, not always within the confines of a church organization. That confuses them, but they recognize God working in other places. Number four, they are not disillusioned with tradition. We think sometimes we simplify, but that's not necessarily the case. But they are frustrated with slick or shallow expressions of religion. So we've got to think in our mind, we need to make sure that we understand there's a difference between traditional values and slick promotion of those values. They see a difference, and rightly so. Why? Oh, isn't technology fun? Okay. Let's try this. Number five, they express a mix of concern and optimism for their peers. You know, it's interesting, when they look at themselves, they're okay, but they have a concern for their peers. This is an interesting phenomenon that happens with multiple kinds of surveys. They have not found faith to be helpful or relevant to their sense of vocation. Now, this is a very important concept because I'm not sure we are addressing this. We often talk about what job do you want, what career do you want, What are you going to do in the future? Whereas the millennial is thinking beyond that. They're saying, my job, many of them, they're not all the same, but many of them are saying, I have a sense of calling to serve. It may come in a different passion, in a different occupation. But they are often saying, where am I going to serve? The career doesn't necessarily have the materialistic aspects that our generation has. And number 7, they struggle when other Christians question their motives. One of the things that came through in my focus groups that I've done is that they are frustrated with adults, older adults, always questioning their motives. They feel judged more and more. I find this statement here well put. It says today's young adults are living through a period of compressed social, cultural, and technological change. It's all being pressed together. This environment invites them to live out their faith in new and sometimes startling ways. They have all these issues that have come in such a short time. You and I have seen many of these things develop over a period of time. But they have seen them come all pressed together all at once. And so living their faith is being expressed in some ways that for us seems a bit strange. So against this backdrop of issues, the General Conference Administration requested that we give special study to our own young adults living in a secular-oriented cultures and societies. So when that assignment was passed on to us, we decided that we would take a look at those Western-oriented divisions, those with Western materialistic type values. Not to leave the others undone, because we're hoping to do those. But right now, the focus was on basically 4 divisions. North America Division was one of those. They're conducting their own study. We're hoping, and as John and I have talked, we're thinking that maybe, possibly next year, we will include North America with division. But as it is now, we're looking at Trans-European Division, Euro-Africa Division, and South Pacific Division. Those 3 divisions are the primary focus right now, and that's what is reflected in this study that I'm sharing with you. So you have, we won't take a whole lot of time to look at these, but we've gone to 9 different countries, done 19 different focus groups, and with over 200, well over 200 young adults participating. Some of you here have been part of that. We usually take the division and sometimes the union stewardship directors with us when we do these focus groups. We don't want too many adults, and if they do come, we put them we put you in the corner, because we really want this to be a time for them to speak open and clearly. Why focus groups? Not a survey. First of all, we believe in surveys. That is not the issue. It's the issue of cost and time. I used to do this kind of work for a number of years, and we always linked surveys and focus groups together as part of the process. Focus groups have a distinct advantage in that you have the opportunity to ask questions personally, see the expressions, and use follow-up questions to see what they've said, and if you want to probe a little bit more. In our process, we got their permission in every one of these to record, and then we transcribe. So I've got volumes of responses, and I've kind of narrowed all those responses down to 7 major groups. I apologize I didn't bring enough of these bookmarks which identify the 7 marks, because we have enough for the union directors, the division directors at least, and so that will be passed out here by Wendell here. I suppose that would be a good time. We looked at the selection of participants based on the ages of 18 to 30. We had a variety. We only had 2 choices when it came to gender. So we had male and female. We had a wide range of ethnicity with gospel, a wide range of spiritual experience. And see, in a focus group, you're not bound to percentages who are saying this or that. They're trying to get a variety of responses. This is why it's nice to do it with a survey. Educational background varied, number of requests. We had usually 12 to 15 in a group, sometimes a little less, sometimes more, as many as 20 or so. We used, when we talked about stewardship, we used both the broad and the restricted definition of stewardship, with a broad meaning all of life, whereas a restricted meant more the material resources that they had. These are the general findings that I have gleaned through the transcriptions and my recollections of the conversations that we've had. First of all, the word stewardship is not understood. Over and over again, we found that they didn't know what the word stewardship meant. They said, when we heard that this was something to do with stewardship, we went to the dictionary to look it up. They were very open. They were very transparent. This is perhaps one of the most inspirational experiences of my ministry, to go through and sit down and talk with these. They were very candid and very open. They expressed frustrations, yes, but they were very open to talking about it. It was a rewarding experience. The uniqueness of the Adventist mission is not clear. In many cases, you could be a Baptist and do what they thought Adventists were commissioned to do. And yet there were extremes as well. There's no monolithic version of what a young adult, an Adventist millennial really looks like. But there are some general characteristics. There are general differences, communication and spirit of judgmentalism between the age groups, between their age and our age. They talk freely about that. There's confusion regarding church finances. The difference between tithe and offerings is not understood. And it would be something that I think we all here need to take a serious look. And in our stewardship training, we certainly need to talk about that. Transparency regarding church finances, they feel, is lacking. They gave several examples of how different offerings were used in ways other than what they thought it was going to be used. Then they felt that we, the church, did not come forth. We're not always transparent with that. I have traveled some divisions, and they showed me foundations of buildings that were funded by the 13th Sabbath offering, for example, but never got past the foundation. Those are monuments that speak to our young adults as a great concern. There's a strong desire to know where the contributions go and how effectively they are being used. They want to know. They have an interest. And I consider that to be a positive. They were frustrated that stewardship, this was a shocker to me. They were frustrated that stewardship is seldom discussed or preached. And they're talking about both the broad and the restricted definitions of stewardship. We pressed that. We talked about that. In some places they said, how come we can't remember the last time we ever heard a stewardship sermon? Now, granted, that came at the end of our discussion, and in which we talked a little bit about what stewardship is. But the 80% of the discussion was them talking, and I was just listening. And they talked, and they talked. And at the end, we had a little segment in which we explained a few things. And he said, so why don't we hear about that? Why don't we hear about that? The segmentation of generations is not helpful. I walked away from many of these focus groups with the realization that I and many others have done a disservice to both the older generation and the younger generation. We have assumed that the young adults do not want to work with us. And so we've adopted a philosophy in many places that we need to give the young adults what? A piece of the pie. And I'd like to suggest that is false. That is a false avenue that we should be going down. Because they're not asking to be isolated. They're asking to work together with us. So I think really the greater, the better motto would be, how can we share a pie together? Instead of isolating. And I think it's very helpful for us to understand the different generations, the different characteristics. But if we're not careful, we will isolate millennials into a separate category, separate from everyone else, and we will violate what I believe is the Elijah message, in which we will come together and work harmoniously together because we find roots in the common faith that God has given to us. Now, I understand that not everyone here will agree with me on that. That is my conclusion after my study and reflection and after visiting personally and asking that question. In fact, on my way here, I rode with a millennial who was not a Christian. He had more of a Buddhist background. And I told him what I was doing, and I said, could I ask you a question? And I asked him this question about cross-generational work. He said, you're exactly right. So it seems to be a characteristic that we have segmentized our populations into groups that are more easy to handle. And while that is helpful, and I'm not denying its helpfulness, but we must not stop there. But let me share with you, there are many good things that need to be understood, that they do like about the church. A sense of community. They talked about the sense of community over and over. Many focus groups brought this up. Well, we feel a sense of community in our church, or a sense of fellowship. We value the fellowship. The care of the members. Well, I remember one young lady especially said, you know, if I have a problem, I know I go to the church and find help. I wish every one of those people said that. But in some places, that is a possibility. Someone will be there, she said, when you have a problem. Similarities of belief around the world. They like this idea that wherever they visit a church, there is a similar belief. And they saw it in contrast to their colleagues in public schools. They said, I know that I go here and find a common bond. Not all of them said that, but enough said that I felt this should be recorded. And many of them said, you know, our doctrines do make sense. I've heard just the opposite. But this group confirmed that. Now, I share this with you because there are strengths, not just weaknesses from the eyes of our young adults, but they see some very positive things. And I'd like to suggest that literature and my own experience has confirmed that at the heart of any program in the church, not just stewardship, lies the litmus test, or the test of its authenticity, is that do we bring meaning and purpose to life? Do we bring meaning and purpose to life by the way we present stewardship or trust services or whatever? I think Gary Dodge did that very well last night. We're talking about the legacy that we're leaving, and we're giving them an opportunity to bring meaning and purpose to their life. This is right on with what I found in my study. So our challenge is the world of young adults is a world filled with opportunity, possibilities, abundance, ready to be challenged, ready to go for mission. The possibilities, seen or not seen, are often determine what to be done. If we don't see possibilities, we're not going to accomplish very much. But when we see the possibilities, what God has done in the lives of these young adults, then the horizon isn't big enough to hold the blessings that God will pour out upon them. So where do we begin? I'd like to suggest that we begin by seeing possibilities. So real quickly, these are the 7 lessons that I've seen. Those of you who have received the bookmark will see this. But reflecting back, these are the principles that I have found. Number 1, I believe that if we're going to be effective in reaching the millennials, we need to understand, number 1, that we need to listen to each other. Listen. There is much to learn. You see, spiritual influence normally begins with listening and being, and not telling. Number 2, we need to discover and affirm vocational identity. We need to understand when we talk with someone. I remember when people talked to me, actually it was a girl I was dating. She saw the things I had underlined. She said to me, have you ever thought of being a minister? That struck me so strong because just a couple of years before, I shook my fist at God and said, get out of here. I don't want my conscience bothered me more. And here a girl that I was dating read something that I had underlined, and she asked me. But it didn't have to be a girlfriend. It could have been a pastor. It could have been someone else who said, I see in you. I just was doing a focus group, for example, and someone who was too young to be there, I didn't know, when she got there, she was 15 years old. And when she expressed herself, I said, you have the ability to write. I need you to write for me for the Dynamic Steward. After the focus group, she came to me and said, you're the second person that's told me that. And she is writing 2 issues from, you'll soon see, coming to us from India. She's right. I'm intrigued by this challenge to see and to affirm in our young adults those qualities that we appreciate. I don't think we do very well, whether we adults or young adults, in affirming the positives. We're pretty good about finding what they're not doing. But even with one another, we need to do that, don't we? Number 3. In everything, be Christ-focused. We say this so much that it becomes redundant, but it's important. And while Christ must be the center, the leader's personal integrity and authenticity bring confidence in what we say. We can talk about Christ as our focus, but we must live it. We must be authentic. And authentic doesn't mean not making mistakes. Number 4, build on the positives. Be willing to admit that there is often more than one right answer. Sometimes we think we have the one right answer. There's oftentimes more than one. Number 5, we need to inform. They are wanting more information, but in doing so, we need to be transparent. You see, mistakes are more easily forgiven than hypocrisy. Mistakes are more easily forgiven than hypocrisy is. Number 6, we need to form ministry teams of mentors and apprentices. When you love what you do, pass it on, and then do it together. This is what I mean by this cross-generational. We have a focus group. My next round of focus groups begins in about 3 weeks. And we have a plan in Spain to begin to do this cross-generational. We're going to train an older adult and a younger adult about some stewardship principles, and then we're going to accompany them as they teach their peers jointly together. Instead of us always being the mouthpiece, teach others that they might, and let us be there to coach them and to encourage them. I believe when we understand that principle, it will spark an epidemic of enthusiasm and joy. Number 7, we need to think mission, but we also need to think boldly. They are not happy with little plans. But without focus, vision has little value. Can we expect millennials to be financial supporters? You'll be interested in an actual experience that was there. I'll just share a little bit with you. One person, you'll see it in bold there, one person wrote in Leadership Journal, speaking of the millennials, that they are restless, entitled, bloated, self-esteem, just desultory, which means they don't have a purpose. They are Twitter-sized in their attention spans. Picture pejorative. And so this guy was writing all these negative things about millennials. But he was answered in the same journal by someone else. And I want to share with you the 7 points, real quickly, that he made. He said, 1, we need, and this person was very successful in a financial campaign. And these are the principles that he found, and they correlate very well with what I found in the focus groups that we did. Number 1, provide real help for people in real need. If we're going to be successful, let's provide real help with people. They're not interested in just passing on more institutions. They have an outward focus, and they define greatness as serving others. Number 2, we need to dial down the hype. We are great speakers, and we grandiose our platforms very well, but they are conditioned to distrust institutions. And the more verbiage that we use, the more they scrutinize what we say. They question the inauthentic. Number 3, we need to find ways for everyone to be part of the team. They want to be part of the team. Don't isolate them. Recruit them and include them in your financial plan, not just asking them for their donations. Number 4, talk honestly about debt. And we're talking about their debt. It's not enough to talk in glowing terms about faith and generosity and not equal gifts but equal sacrifice. Those are good terms, and I use them and I like them and they're true. But that doesn't address their problem, their challenge. We have to talk about the real politic of debt. Many of them face serious college debts, and we need to face them, understand them. Face it, acknowledge it, and work with it. Number 5, keep tech relational. 71% of the millennials get information about a nonprofit through web searches, but don't substitute technology for genuine relationships. Number 6, set the threshold low and the participation high. I remember this. Some of you may not have done what we've done in North America with in-gathering, but I remember that when I was a young pastor. I set the threshold low and the participation high. We said everyone can either make hot chocolate, that we always did it in the winter. You can make hot chocolate and pass us out, or you can go with us. We found a position for everyone because our goal was participation. And we got finances. We met our goals, both the spiritual goals because we were interested in Bible studies, but we also met our financial goals. These young adults are asking the same thing. Set the threshold low. Many millennials think, I don't have much to give. Let them know what they can give. Many of them have many ideas and contributions. They may not always have money, but it's not always money that we need. Number 7, wrestle your own demons to the man. Millennials can tell if you haven't. Be authentic. They will trust a leader who is honest and unafraid to be in personal contact with them, and who will let them ask hard questions. You don't have to have always the answers, but give them the freedom of asking the questions. And so again, we find that we've offered them a piece of the pie, but I like to suggest that maybe sharing a piece of the pie with young adults isn't such a good idea after all. Maybe we should learn how to share the whole pie. I want to share with you a video. We have just enough time to show it. And I'm going to ask you, in the context of this video, to keep in mind what we've just talked about with young adults. I've shown this video in many places in the world, even through translators. It doesn't work the best through translators, obviously. But the principles are so important. And it gives us a foundation by which we can begin to see the possibilities of our young adults. Let me give you the points of the film so that you will catch them and watch for them. 1, believe it and you will see it. 2, recognize abundance, not scarcity. Recognize abundance. 3, look for possibilities. 4, unleash your energy to fix what is wrong. Ride the changes. Don't complain that things are changing. Ride the changes. You'll see in the film the waves and how we can ride those. Take yourself to your edge. Take yourself. Be willing to challenge yourself. And 7, be your best, not in the world, But